What you are about to encounter does not sit comfortably in the category of new information. It exists in a quieter place, a place between what has been ignored and what has always been present. This is not something that was hidden from you by force. It was hidden by familiarity, by the way perception learned to narrow itself over time. There is a reason this moment feels different, not dramatic, not explosive, just subtly unmistakable. You are not here to collect ideas or add another framework to what you already know. You are here because something in you has become capable of recognizing itself. For a long time, awareness moved through life, identified entirely with form, with thought, with reaction, with the endless commentary that labeled experience and called it reality. That way of seeing was not wrong. It was simply incomplete. It served its purpose until it could no longer explain what you were sensing beneath the surface of things. You may have felt it as restlessness, as a quiet dissonance, as the sense that repeating the same explanations no longer brought clarity. Not because they failed, but because you had outgrown the level at which they operated. This is where recognition begins. Long before concepts divided experience into separate objects and identities, awareness was already present, not as a thing observing reality, but as the space in which reality appeared. Nothing needed to be understood then. Nothing needed to be managed. Experience unfolded within awareness without resistance. Over time, attention contracted. Identity formed. Perception learned to anchor itself to thought and memory. Reality became something you believed you were inside of, instead of something happening through you. This shift created usefulness, structure, and survival. It also created separation. What you are sensing now is not a call to abandon form or reject the world. It is an invitation to remember what was never actually lost. Awareness was never absent. It was simply occupied. The knowledge you are approaching is not forbidden because it is dangerous. It remained unspoken because it cannot be grasped at the level of effort. It becomes visible only when attention softens enough to notice itself. This is why explanations alone were never enough. Why techniques felt promising but incomplete. Why seeking created movement without arrival. Awareness cannot be found by chasing it. It reveals itself when the chase quiets. You are standing at a threshold, not because something external has changed, but because perception has reached a point of stability. A point where you can observe thought without becoming it completely, where emotion can be felt without defining identity, where experience can be witnessed without immediate interpretation. This threshold does not announce itself with certainty. It appears as recognition, as the feeling that something you are hearing is not new yet feels precise, familiar yet clarifying. From here, the way reality appears begins to shift, not because you are applying a new belief, but because the observer itself is becoming visible. When awareness notices its own activity, the relationship between inner state and outer experience becomes impossible to ignore. This is not philosophy. It is not metaphor. It is the basic structure of how experience functions. Reality does not exist as a fixed environment acting upon you. It responds continuously to the quality of awareness through which it is perceived. Nothing here is meant to be believed. Belief belongs to the mind. What follows is meant to be noticed, to be recognized directly. You are not preparing to learn how reality works. You are beginning to remember how you participate in it. Reality responds to your inner state. Reality does not respond to what you say you want. It responds to the state from which you are perceiving. This distinction is subtle, but once seen, it changes how everything is understood. For most of your life, you were taught to focus on outcomes, goals, and intentions, as if reality were an external system that needed to be convinced or persuaded. That model never fully worked because it misunderstood the relationship. You are not sending requests outward into a neutral world. You are participating in a continuous feedback loop. The quality of your inner state shapes the way reality organizes itself around you, moment by moment, not symbolically, not morally, structurally. Think of reality as a mirror that does not interpret, it does not judge, it does not negotiate. It reflects with precision. What it reflects is not your effort or your affirmations. It reflects coherence or incoherence within awareness itself. This is why two people can move through similar circumstances and experience entirely different worlds. The difference is not luck. It is not destiny. It is the internal state through which perception is operating. One experiences resistance everywhere. The other experiences responsiveness. The environment appears the same, but the interaction is fundamentally different. When you attempt to change reality without addressing the state from which you are acting, frustration arises. You may notice patterns repeating, situations echoing themselves in new forms. This repetition is not punishment. It is feedback. Reality is showing you the consistency of the state you are holding. This is often misunderstood. Many believe the mirror responds to thoughts. But thoughts are surface-level activity. They come and go rapidly. What remains beneath them is a more stable tone, a background emotional and perceptual stance. That is what reality reflects. If your thoughts declare confidence while your internal state carries doubt, reality responds to the doubt. If your words express openness while your nervous system remains guarded, reality reflects the guard. This is not because reality is selective. It is because it is precise. Once you see this, the struggle to control outcomes begins to soften. You realize that forcing change at the level of events is like arguing with a reflection instead of adjusting the position of the mirror. The reflection is not wrong, it is accurate. This recognition can feel unsettling at first because it removes external blame. It also removes helplessness. You begin to see that the power you were seeking was never located in manipulation of circumstances. It was always in the quality of awareness you inhabit while meeting them. This does not mean you must monitor yourself constantly or suppress emotion. Quite the opposite. It requires honesty. Reality reflects what is actually present, not what you wish were present. When you allow yourself to notice your state without judgment, coherence begins naturally. There is a quiet relief in this. You no longer need to convince reality to change. You begin to listen to what it is showing you. Each interaction becomes information. Each response becomes guidance. This is where responsibility changes its meaning. It no longer feels like burden. It becomes clarity. You see how inner alignment produces outer responsiveness without effort. How resistance dissolves when internal contradiction resolves. Reality is not teaching you lessons. It is reflecting you faithfully. Once this is understood, the question shifts. Instead of asking how to change the world, you begin to ask from where you are perceiving it. That question alone alters the relationship. You are not inside reality trying to shape it. Reality is moving through you, responding to the state you are in. Emotional frequency is the true signal. Beneath every thought you have, there is a more powerful current moving. It does not speak in language. It does not form arguments or explanations. It communicates through sensation, tone, and feeling. This current is emotional frequency, and it is the primary signal reality responds to. Thoughts are often mistaken for the source of creation because they are easy to notice. They are loud. They repeat. They demand attention. But thoughts are transient. They rise and fall quickly. Emotional frequency is slower, deeper, and far more influential. It is the atmosphere in which thoughts appear, not the other way around. You can say the right words and hold the right ideas while broadcasting a completely different signal underneath. When this happens, reality does not respond to what you are thinking. It responds to what you are being. This is why effort alone rarely produces lasting change. You may concentrate intensely on positive outcomes while your emotional body remains tense, guarded, or uncertain. The mind is asking for expansion while the body is signaling contraction. Reality responds to the contraction. Emotional frequency is not about individual feelings that come and go. It is about the dominant emotional tone you return to when nothing is happening. The baseline state you inhabit between moments of distraction. This baseline shapes perception before thought even arises. If your baseline is urgency, reality reflects pressure. If your baseline is lack, reality reflects limitation. If your baseline is openness, reality reflects opportunity. This reflection is automatic. It does not require belief. It does not require faith. It happens because perception itself is organized through emotional coherence. Many people attempt to override this by repeating affirmations or visualizations. When those practices fail, they assume they did something wrong. In truth, the practice was aimed at the wrong layer. You cannot convince reality with words when your emotional frequency is saying something else. The universe does not listen to vocabulary. It responds to resonance. This can be seen clearly when you observe moments of alignment, times when things flowed without force, when conversations opened naturally, when opportunities appeared without struggle. In those moments, you were not trying to control outcomes. Your emotional frequency was coherent. Your inner state was stable. Reality responded accordingly. This does not mean you must feel good all the time. Emotional frequency is not about constant positivity. It is about congruence. When emotions are allowed, acknowledged, and felt honestly, they move. When they are resisted or suppressed, they stagnate and become a fixed signal. Resistance creates distortion. Awareness restores coherence. When you begin to notice emotional frequency without trying to manipulate it, something shifts. You stop treating emotions as obstacles. You recognize them as information. Each emotional response reveals how you are relating to experience in that moment. This awareness changes everything. You stop fighting feelings. You start listening to them, not for their story, but for their signal. Reality responds to the signal you sustain, not the story you tell yourself. As emotional frequency becomes visible, you gain access to a deeper form of alignment. You no longer need to control your thoughts aggressively. When the emotional tone settles, thoughts reorganize naturally. Perception clears. Action becomes simpler. This is why lasting change always feels quieter than expected. It does not arrive through force. It arrives through coherence. Once you understand this, you stop asking how to think better. You begin noticing how you feel beneath thinking. That shift moves you closer to the source of interaction itself. The signal you are broadcasting is not hidden. It is happening now, shaping what appears next. Emotions as navigational signals. Emotions are often misunderstood as obstacles to clarity. They are treated as disruptions to be managed or eliminated. But emotions are not the problem. They are indicators. They function as navigational signals that reveal how aligned or misaligned you are with the direction you are moving. Every emotional response carries information, not about the external situation itself, but about your relationship to it. When this is understood, emotions stop feeling random or overwhelming. They begin to feel instructive. Pleasant emotions tend to arise when perception and action are coherent. When what you are doing aligns with what you value and with the state you are inhabiting. Unpleasant emotions arise when there is contradiction, when behavior, belief, and emotional frequency are pulling in different directions. This does not mean that discomfort indicates failure. Often indicates adjustment. The emotional system is constantly communicating where resistance is present and where flow is available. When discomfort appears, the usual response is to suppress it or explain it away. This blocks the signal. It is like covering a warning light on a dashboard instead of checking what it points to. The light is not the problem, ignoring it is. Emotions become overwhelming only when they are not listened to. When awareness meets emotion directly, without judgment or urgency, the signal becomes clear. The intensity often dissolves on its own. There is a difference between feeling an emotion and becoming identified with it. Feeling allows movement. Identification creates fixation. When you identify with emotion, you assume it defines who you are or what is true. When you observe emotion, it informs you without controlling you. This distinction is subtle but powerful. As you develop the ability to observe emotion, you begin to notice patterns. Certain choices consistently bring contraction. Others bring expansion. This pattern recognition is the foundation of intuitive navigation. You do not need to analyze every feeling. You simply need to notice the direction it points. Expansion does not always feel comfortable, but it feels open. Contraction does not always feel painful, but it feels restrictive. This information is always available. It is immediate. It does not require belief. It requires attention. Emotions also reveal when you are attempting to force outcomes. Tension, impatience, and frustration often signal that effort is being applied where alignment is missing. The system is indicating that a different approach is needed. When you respond to emotional signals with curiosity instead of resistance, you regain trust in your own guidance. You stop outsourcing direction to external rules or rigid frameworks. You begin to move in response to lived feedback. This is not impulsiveness. It is responsiveness. As emotional literacy increases, decision-making simplifies. You spend less time debating options mentally and more time sensing alignment. Choices that once felt confusing become obvious. Not because they are easy, but because they resonate. This does not remove challenge from life. It removes unnecessary struggle. You still encounter difficulty, but you no longer add confusion on top of it. Emotions guide without commanding. They inform without dictating. They are signals, not orders. When you listen, movement becomes more precise. You begin to trust the internal compass that was always present. Why control disrupts manifestation? Control is often mistaken for strength. It feels active, decisive, and protective. But beneath the surface, control usually arises from mistrust. A quiet belief that reality will not respond unless it is pressured, managed, or constrained. This belief creates interference. When you try to control outcomes, attention tightens. Awareness contracts around a specific result. Possibility narrows. The system becomes rigid. Reality responds to this contraction by reflecting limitation, delay, or resistance. This is not because control is wrong. It is because control changes the signal you are emitting. Control carries tension. It broadcasts urgency, fear of loss, and the assumption that something is missing. Even when control is disguised as discipline or planning, the underlying frequency often communicates distrust in the natural responsiveness of reality. Manifestation does not respond to insistence. It responds to coherence. When you attempt to force an outcome, you override the informational feedback that emotions and perception are offering. You stop listening. You impose direction instead of responding to alignment. This breaks the feedback loop that allows reality to organize efficiently around your state. You may notice this when effort increases but results diminish. When you do more, push harder, and think faster, yet feel increasingly disconnected. This is a signal that control has replaced clarity. Control also creates internal conflict. One part of you tries to enforce a direction while another part resists. This internal contradiction becomes the dominant signal. Reality reflects contradiction with inconsistency. Letting go of control does not mean abandoning intention. It means releasing the compulsion to dictate how and when outcomes must occur. Intention without control remains flexible. It allows reality to respond in ways the mind could not predict. This flexibility is not weakness, it is intelligence. When control softens, awareness widens. You begin to notice opportunities that were previously invisible because attention was locked onto a single outcome. Movement becomes adaptive instead of rigid. Many fear that releasing control will lead to passivity or chaos. In practice, the opposite happens. Action becomes more precise. You act when alignment is present and pause when it is not. Timing improves. Effort decreases. Control seeks certainty. Awareness tolerates uncertainty. Reality functions best when uncertainty is allowed. It is within uncertainty that new configurations emerge. Control collapses these possibilities prematurely. It chooses familiarity over responsiveness. You can feel the difference internally. Control feels tight. Allowing feels open. Control demands. Allowing listens. This does not require trust in external forces or belief systems. It requires trust in perception itself. When you trust the signals you are receiving, control becomes unnecessary. The moment you stop forcing reality to comply, it begins to cooperate. This is not surrender to circumstance. It is alignment with how interaction actually works. Control disrupts manifestation because it replaces dialogue with command. Reality responds to dialogue. Allowing creates coherence. Allowing is often misunderstood as passivity, as if releasing control means waiting without direction or effort. But allowing is not inaction. It is responsiveness without interference. It is the state in which perception remains open enough for reality to organize itself coherently around you. When you allow, you are not giving up intention. You are removing tension from it. Intention held without strain becomes a stable signal. It does not fluctuate with urgency or fear. It remains present, available, and responsive. Coherence emerges when inner state and outer action are aligned. Allowing creates the conditions for this alignment. Instead of forcing outcomes, you listen to feedback. Instead of pushing forward blindly, you adjust in response to what is actually happening. This shift can feel subtle, but its effects are immediate. When allowing replaces forcing, effort decreases while effectiveness increases. Movement becomes smoother. Decisions feel clearer. You stop trying to prove anything to reality. Allowing also restores trust in timing. You recognize that outcomes unfold through sequences, not commands. When you interrupt these sequences with impatience, coherence breaks. When you allow them to complete, results emerge naturally. This does not mean waiting indefinitely. It means acting from clarity instead of anxiety. You act when alignment is felt. You pause when resistance appears. Both are forms of intelligence. You may notice that when allowing becomes your default, opportunities arise without struggle. Conversations open at the right moment. Information arrives when needed. Paths reveal themselves gradually instead of all at once. This responsiveness feels different from effort. It feels quieter, less dramatic, more stable. Allowing also changes how you relate to uncertainty. Instead of treating uncertainty as a threat, you treat it as space. Space for reality to respond in ways you could not plan. This openness invites complexity and creativity. When you force outcomes, you reduce reality to your current understanding. When you allow, you give reality room to exceed it. Coherence is not something you manufacture. It is something you stop disrupting. This is why allowing often feels like relief. You are no longer carrying the burden of managing every detail. You participate without micromanaging. You engage without gripping. Allowing does not remove responsibility. It refines it. Responsibility becomes attentiveness instead of control. You stay present. You respond honestly. You adjust when needed. This state of coherence is self-reinforcing. As reality responds smoothly, trust deepens. As trust deepens, allowing stabilizes. As allowing stabilizes, interaction becomes increasingly precise. You begin to notice that manifestation was never about effort. It was about coherence. When coherence is present, reality does not need to be persuaded. It responds. Contrast as refinement, not punishment. Contrast is often misinterpreted as resistance or failure. When experiences do not match expectations, the immediate assumption is that something has gone wrong. But contrast does not arise to block you, it arises to clarify. Without contrast, awareness cannot refine itself. Just as the eye perceives shape through light and shadow, consciousness recognizes alignment through difference. Contrast reveals what resonates and what does not by making both visible. When an experience feels uncomfortable, limiting, or misaligned, it is tempting to judge it as a mistake. But contrast is not an error in the system. It is part of the system's intelligence. It shows you with precision where coherence is present and where it is missing. Every contrast sharpens perception. It removes ambiguity. You may believe you want something until contrast shows you what you do not want. You may think you are aligned until resistance reveals hidden contradiction. This is not punishment. It is refinement. Contrast also exposes attachment. When a desired outcome is delayed or denied, emotional reactions surface. Frustration, disappointment, or urgency appear. These reactions are not caused by the delay itself. They are caused by the grip placed on a specific form of outcome. This is valuable information. Contrast shows where control still operates, where allowing has not fully stabilized, where identity remains tied to results instead of coherence. As awareness deepens, contrast becomes easier to interpret. Instead of asking why something is happening, you begin to ask what it is revealing. The question shifts from blame to clarity. Contrast also prevents stagnation. If reality always responded exactly as expected, growth would plateau. Perception would settle into habitual patterns. Contrast disrupts these patterns gently, but persistently, inviting reassessment. You may notice that moments of greatest clarity often follow periods of contrast. Not because difficulty creates wisdom, but because contrast dissolves assumptions. It strips away what was unexamined. When contrast is resisted, suffering increases. When contrast is observed, insight emerges. The experience itself does not change immediately, but your relationship to it does. This change reduces friction and restores movement. Contrast also refines desire. It distinguishes between what you think you want and what actually aligns. Some desires fade when contrast exposes their source as fear or conditioning. Others strengthen when contrast confirms their coherence. This process is automatic when awareness is present. You do not need to seek contrast. You only need to stop interpreting it as punishment. Reality is not withholding. It is adjusting. Contrast is how the system recalibrates. When you allow contrast to inform rather than discourage, it accelerates alignment. You move more precisely. You waste less energy. You stop chasing outcomes that no longer resonate. Contrast is not a setback. It is a signal that perception is refining itself. The present moment as the point of power. All interaction with reality happens now, not symbolically. Literally, the present moment is not a concept. It is the only point at which perception operates and response occurs. Past and future exist as mental references, but they do not possess causal power. Awareness does. Most effort is misplaced because attention is rarely here. It is pulled into memory or projection. Regret reconstructs the past. Anticipation imagines the future. Both feel real, but neither is active. When attention leaves the present moment, responsiveness collapses. This is why change feels difficult. Not because reality resists, but because attention is divided. The present moment is not passive. It is dynamic. It is the point where emotional frequency stabilizes, where perception organizes, and where action becomes effective. When awareness rests here, without tension, coherence emerges naturally. Presence does not require silence or stillness. It requires contact. Full contact with what is occurring, without immediately labeling it or trying to escape it. This contact reclaims power that was scattered across time. You may notice that when you are fully present, decisions become simpler. You are not calculating outcomes or rehearsing explanations. You are responding. This response is intelligent because it is informed by direct perception rather than assumption. The present moment also dissolves unnecessary fear. Fear depends on imagined futures. Guilt depends on remembered pasts. When attention returns to now, these constructs lose their grip. What remains is sensation, awareness, and the capacity to respond. This does not mean the past is erased or the future is ignored. It means they are held lightly, used as reference, not as identity. When the present moment becomes primary, time becomes a tool instead of a prison. Power in this context does not mean control. It means access. Access to perception before it is distorted by expectation. Access to emotion before it is suppressed or amplified. Access to action before it becomes reaction. This is where manifestation actually occurs. Not as a dramatic event, but as continuous adjustment. Each moment of presence subtly alters the trajectory of experience. Small shifts compound. Patterns reorganize. Outcomes change without force. Presence also reveals when effort is unnecessary. You stop trying to solve problems that are not present. You stop rehearsing defenses that are not needed. Energy consolidates. The present moment is where allowing becomes possible. Control requires time. It imagines future threats and tries to prevent them. Allowing happens now. It responds to what is actually happening. When awareness stabilizes in the present, emotional frequency becomes coherent. Signals clarify. Navigation improves. Reality responds with less resistance because the signal is clean. This is why presence feels grounding. It returns attention to the source of interaction, not to thought, but to awareness itself. The present moment is not a step in a process. It is the process. Parallel realities and perceptual selection. Reality does not unfold along a single fixed path. At every moment, multiple possibilities coexist, not as fantasies or abstractions, but as potential configurations of experience. What you perceive as a single reality is the result of selection, not creation. This selection does not happen consciously. It happens through coherence. The state you inhabit determines which version of reality becomes perceptible to you. When your emotional frequency, attention, and perception align, awareness naturally settles into experiences that match that alignment. When they are fragmented, experience reflects fragmentation. Reality does not move toward you. You move through reality by shifting how you perceive. This is why sudden changes sometimes occur without effort. A conversation leads somewhere unexpected. An opportunity appears at the exact moment you stop searching. A pattern dissolves without confrontation. These shifts are not miracles. They are transitions between perceptual tracks. You did not create something new. You became able to perceive something that was already available. Parallel realities are not separate worlds stacked on top of each other. They are overlapping possibilities differentiated by coherence. Like radio frequencies occupying the same space, each reality is accessible depending on the tuning of awareness. When your tuning changes, the signal changes. This is why trying to force outcomes often fails. Force does not change tuning. It adds noise. Noise makes selection unstable. Awareness jumps between possibilities without settling into any of them fully. Perceptual selection becomes stable when presence, emotional frequency, and intention align. In that state, movement feels smooth. You recognize opportunities without effort. You encounter less resistance because you are no longer oscillating between incompatible states. This also explains why change can feel disorienting. When awareness shifts into a different perceptual track, familiar reference points dissolve. Old patterns no longer respond. Relationships, routines, and assumptions feel out of sync. This is not loss, it is recalibration. You are not leaving reality behind. You are leaving a version of it that no longer matches your state. The mind often tries to understand this intellectually, but intellectual understanding is secondary. Selection happens before explanation. You notice it as a change in how life feels rather than a change in how it looks. As awareness stabilizes, these transitions become less dramatic. You stop oscillating between states. You settle into coherence. Reality feels consistent again, but different. This consistency is not rigid. It is responsive. When alignment shifts, perception adjusts smoothly rather than abruptly. You begin to trust this process because it becomes predictable in its responsiveness. Not predictable in form, but in feedback. Coherence produces coherence. Fragmentation produces fragmentation. This is not metaphysics. It is how perception operates. You are not choosing realities consciously. You are selecting them by the state you live in. You are not in reality. You are reality. At a certain point, the distinction between observer and world begins to dissolve. Not conceptually, but experientially. You stop relating to reality as something external that you move through. You begin to recognize it as something that happens through you. This is not an idea to adopt. It is a shift in perception that occurs when awareness becomes stable enough to notice its own activity. You see that everything you experience appears within awareness. Sensations, thoughts, emotions, and environments arise in the same field. The separation was assumed, not actual. When this recognition settles, effort drops away. You no longer feel like a participant struggling to influence outcomes. You feel like the space in which outcomes unfold. This does not remove agency. It clarifies it. Agency was never about control. It was about participation. You realize that reality does not exist independently of perception. It organizes itself through the lens of awareness. The lens is not personal in the way identity suggests. It is the structure through which experience becomes knowable. This is why nothing here required belief. Beliefs belong to the mind. Awareness precedes belief. It is present before thought labels it and after thought releases it. When you see yourself as reality in motion rather than an object inside it, fear softens. Not because challenges disappear, but because they are no longer interpreted as threats to identity. They become movements within a larger field. This does not elevate you above life. It roots you within it. You engage more fully because you are no longer resisting what arises. You respond instead of reacting. You participate without gripping. The search that once felt urgent dissolves quietly. Not because answers were found, but because the question lost its hold. You were never looking for information. You were looking for recognition. This recognition does not need to be maintained through effort. It becomes the baseline. Awareness does not need to remind itself of what it is. It simply functions from clarity. You still plan. You still act. You still feel. But these occur without the constant tension of separation. Life feels less like something happening to you and more like something happening as you. This is the end of seeking and the beginning of presence. There is nothing to apply after this. No method to repeat. No practice to perfect. What has been revealed was never absent. It was only overlooked by attention turned outward. Reality is not responding to you as an individual. It is responding to itself through you. And that is what has always been happening. If this message resonated with you, subscribe now to stay connected with the energy that awakens you. Like this video to anchor this frequency in your field. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a transmission that your spirit needs. And comment below, I am the frequency. Let the universe hear your voice. You're not here by chance. You're here to rise and remember who you truly are.